Big ideas start with a spark. At Tassis, we use that spark to ignite the fire in ourselves and our kids. So with the trust we build and the knowledge we share, we can grow together and stand tall, creating opportunities to advance in business while setting an example for the next generation. Whether you are starting fresh in Portugal or expanding globally, we're here to support each other. This is more than a network. We are a community that sets the examples for the leaders of tomorrow.
Hi, Catarina. Thank you for joining me. I wanted to talk about AI regulation and how, especially in schools and in places of education and even in the workforce, how we should use AI regulations like AI checkers or scanners, and where we should not be using it, where we should be using judgment to decide if something is authentic or not.
Okay, so there's a lot of work being done regarding that in European institutions right now. So there's a big regulatory field and a directive that regulates AI called the AI Act that is going to come into force. That kind of gives us some clues on how we should position towards the use of AI in different contexts, namely in schools. So first of all, the regulation makes mandatory to include when something is AI generated, which means that if you're using ChatGPT or Gemini or Grok or any other tool as a source of work, you should include that as a disclaimer in your work, namely using a affidavit or just a written paragraph saying that, well, I use AI for synthesizing or gathering ideas or something like that, but also that companies will be made to do that as well. So any content that is going to be AI generated needs to be clearly marked as AI generated. And you're right, tools don't necessarily pick up if something is AI generated because it's difficult to figure out when something has been mingled with AI. So for instance, it's very difficult when you're reading a scientific paper right now, it's very difficult to determine if that was written by an AI or if that is something that is just based on the researcher's kind of mindset. And I'll give you a personal example. I just published recently an article regarding AI. It's actually AI framework to govern how AI should be used and the levels of risk that we need to be attentive to and how we can approach them in a mindful, responsible, and ethical way. And when I was writing my article, I actually had to use AI as a source of synthesizing because I write too much. And the question was, how far from using an AI tool to synthesize my work actually changes the shape of what I wrote. So in the end, I had to do it by myself because I wasn't aware, as an AI researcher, as someone who builds AI daily, I wasn't fully aware of what the level of intervention of AI was ethically acceptable for a researcher to write a paper on. So I ended up doing it by myself.
That kind of brings me to my next question. What do you think is the line? I mean, I'm sure the line is a very gray area and it changes depending on what it's being used for. But what do you think is where do you think the line should be drawn for how AI is used, especially in things like policy, legislation, government, even healthcare, just things that are really going to impact people on a deeper level than just helping with their homework?
Okay, again, great question. And it's something I've been working towards actually. I've been called in by the European Union as an expert towards something called the AI uses high risk. So it's a bunch of workshops in which the European Communion, the European Commission, and the European AI Office actually calls in experts to look into actual practical uses and determine if they're reliable and if they should be used or not. And I happen to be sitting at one that worked towards biometrics, law enforcement, and emergency services, which to me are very, very difficult to determine. So I don't have a traditional approach to definition of high risk because I take a much more conservative approach. To me, everything is high risk until proven otherwise. And that is actually the framework that we've implemented internally at the company I work for. So everything to us is high risk, and we treat it as high risk. That means continuous human in the loop, permanent oversight, explainability to the maximum extent that is possible in technical terms. And what defines if something is high risk is not actually the models or the type of AI that you're using, is where you're using it. So for you to have an idea, if we're using AI to do basic segmentation for forecasting, for instance, even if we're doing it in an emergency service or for police force, that might not necessarily translate into high risk. But if then the forecast advises people to take action that might influence fundamental rights, then that's high risk. The thing is, it's very difficult to determine when you're designing a system if something is compliant and if your risk classification is correct or not. Because there's the use case that is defined and what the AI is designed to do, and then there's what we call the emergent use case. Something that happens when you release a piece of technology into the world, it always changes. It's always different from the people that conceived the system thought it would be. And it changes that much with AI to the point that tools are being used for something completely different than the use they were designed for. So therefore, the cautious approach, in my view, is determining high risk by default and then choosing to de-escalate the classification of risk if you have proof that the system is safe.
Do you think the perspective that AI is taking over or that AI is dangerous, especially in the last couple of years, do you think it's a valid approach? Do you think it's a valid way of thinking? Or do you think it's, like you were saying, just being cautious and aware and constantly intervening?
Okay, so as said, I design systems, so I'm very optimistic about them. However, I think
You're
we've been
pro AI.
irresponsible.
Yeah.
What I see is that there's a lot of AI everywhere. There's AI in toothbrushes nowadays. That there's nowhere in our modern world where AI is not there yet.
Yeah.
Or if it's not, it's going to be in the next couple of months. So it's impossible to escape AI right now. What happens is because we were so excited about the potential of the technology that we weren't too focused on governing how the technology should work.
So you think that should have been at the beginning as well when it was first coming out? Laws and legislations
Not
with
necessarily,
it? No.
because it's difficult to create regulation that is applicable towards a wide range of different things in technology. And AI is not just generative AI. There's a lot of AI. The field we work in is a mix between good old machine learning and agentic AI on top of it. It's like a brain. So it's difficult to design a system that works for all the different aspects of AI and regulate towards that. It's very, very difficult to do. So I don't think that regulation and law should have come first, even though regulation is around for quite a while. Like the first regulatory efforts have been done around 2018, way before AI was something that everyone was talking about. It's just not public. So what I think is when we're looking into relevant uses in society, if we're using it in education, if we're using it in government, if we're using it in mission critical environments, we need to be more cautious about it, and we need to look into AI as something that is governed. That's why I defended early on and when I was talking that we can't look at it from a traditional regulation perspective or a traditional compliance perspective. If you're looking at it after you've used it, it's already too late.
That's very true. I guess my last question for you is, what do you hope for the future of AI and technology and the work that you do? How do you think the fact that people speak about it more, talk about it, like summits like this, will help further your field or maybe hinder it?
Okay, so again, AI is a wonderful tool. We can achieve a lot with it. Like I was sharing earlier, until now, it was impossible to improve standard of care for patients in certain environments because we simply did not have the compute capacity to look into the data and forecast on what we're doing and simulate scenarios. We can do that with AI. That's something that we've been working towards. So I would like to have more of that. Of course, that society tends to look into AI as a form of entertaining first, and we see that everywhere. I think entertaining and being playful with it is important because that brings joy in use as well, and that speeds up adoption. But we need to focus on capacity building, which is looking into the areas in which society is struggling to have answers and have AI assist us on that. But that also is something for your generation to work towards. Uh, my generation will probably set up the field towards what can be built with it, and we're speeding development of the technology, but then the younger generation will get to see how that can be harvested to improve society as a whole. And that's what we should be focusing on. Not just having something cool that actually does things that we couldn't do by ourselves, but looking into something useful that actually improves society.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.